Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at Brianna Wiest's The Mountain Is You. We all have those moments where we kind of trip ourselves up.
Man.
It's like we're reaching for something we want, but part of us is holding us back.
Yeah, definitely. That's that self-sabotage that Wiest really dives into.
And it's something I think we can all relate to on some level, but it's kind of a tough one to grapple with.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about the book is that Wiest doesn't just settle for like the easy explanation, the whole lack of willpower thing.
Yeah.
She goes way deeper and shows how self-sabotage is often a symptom of, something much bigger happening under the surface.
So it's not just that we're being lazy or making bad choices.
Right, exactly. It's a
Okay.
imagine you're driving a car and you keep hitting the brakes even though you consciously want to go forward.
Okay.
There's probably a reason you're hitting those brakes. Maybe there's an obstacle you see, even if it's not obvious to anybody else. And self-sabotage is kind of like that. It's our unconscious mind kind of hitting the brakes,
Yes.
trying to protect us from something that it sees as a threat.
Oh, that's interesting. So is that where that whole mountain metaphor comes in, like the self-sabotage itself, i.s. the mountain we have to climb?
Exactly. And Wiest actually uses this story about Carl Jung to illustrate this.
Okay.
Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, well, as a kid, he used to faint in school.
Oh, wow.
And later he realized that he was unconsciously connecting fainting with escaping class, because school was a place that made him really uncomfortable.
Oh, so his body was literally finding a way to escape a stressful situation.
Exactly. And that's a really key point here. Self-sabotage often isn't about us consciously trying to hurt ourselves.
Right.
It's more about protecting ourselves from things like vulnerability or failure or even massive change.
Okay, so it's like our internal alarm system going off even if the danger isn't real.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, so that makes sense. But how do we even figure out what our alarm system is reacting to? Like, how do we figure out what those subconscious things are that are driving us?
That's a great question. Well, Wyeth says that a lot of times our unconscious mind makes these negative associations,
Okay.
kind of links our goals to a negative self-image.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's almost like this twisted logic puzzle. So let's say you grew up believing that all rich people are bad.
Okay.
Well, if your goal is financial success, your unconscious mind might actually sabotage your efforts to make money.
Because it thinks being rich is bad.
Exactly. It's trying to protect you from becoming what you think is bad.
Wow, so we're fighting against our own ingrained beliefs.
Yes. And that's where this idea of the upper limit comes in,
Okay.
which is so fascinating. Wise says that we all have this sort of baseline tolerance for happiness, almost like an internal thermostat.
Okay.
So if things get too good or too far outside our comfort zone, we might self-sabotage to bring things back down to a familiar level.
So we're not really comfortable being too happy or successful.
It's like we unconsciously believe that we don't deserve it.
Wow.
Our minds try to keep things balanced, even if that balance isn't really serving us.
That is wild. Okay, so we've talked about why we self-sabotage, but what does it actually look like in real life?
Well, Wheatest actually breaks down some common forms of self-sabotage. And I think a lot of people are going to recognize themselves in these.
Let's hear it.
Okay, well, there's the classic perfectionism, that feel of failure that makes you procrastinate or even avoid challenges altogether.
Oh, yeah. I think I struggle with that one.
A lot of people do.
It's like I'd rather not try at all than risk not being perfect.
Right, and that's a form of self-protection. By not trying, you never have to face the possibility of failing.
Okay, I see.
Another one is what she calls justification, which is basically becoming a master at making excuses.
Oh, yeah. So instead of taking action, we're just making up stories in our heads about why we can't or shouldn't even bother.
Exactly. We choose comfort over growth because growth can be scary and unpredictable.
That makes sense.
And then there's this kind of sneaky one, downplaying our successes.
Oh, yeah. So even when we do achieve something, we kind of minimize it to avoid scrutiny.
Or that fear of peaking too early.
Yeah, like we're trying to stay under the radar, almost like success is embarrassing.
Exactly. And Weenus links this back to those negative associations we talked about.
Right.
We might unconsciously believe that success is equal to negative qualities.
That's so interesting. Okay, so we've got perfectionism, making excuses, and downplaying our achievements. I'm definitely seeing some patterns here. What other forms does she cover?
Oh, there are a few more that I think will really resonate with you. We can talk about those in the next part.
Okay, awesome. Looking forward to it.
So, last time we were talking about all those different ways self-sabotage can kind of disguise itself.
Yeah, it's like we were unmasking the saboteur.
Exactly. And there are a few more that Weenus talks about. that I think you'll find really interesting.
Okay, I'm ready.
Well, there's the classic fear of failing,
Oh.
which can turn into, catastrophic thinking, all these totally irrational worries.
Yeah.
Like our minds are just coming up with these worst-case
To
scenarios.
scare us away.
Exactly, so we don't even try.
Yeah, I definitely felt that like deer in the headlights feeling when I have a big decision or opportunity in front of me.
Right, and that fear just keeps us playing small.
We don't take risks.
We miss out on opportunities
And we end up just making that fear worse.
because we never give ourselves the chance to learn from it.
It's like we're trapped in this prison of our own fear.
Exactly. Now, Weiss also talks about how self-sabotage can show up in our relationships.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, sometimes it's about spending time with the wrong people.
People who aren't good for us.
Yeah, those relationships that drain your energy
Or
or reinforce negative feelings or make you doubt yourself.
it's like we're unconsciously looking for people who confirm our negative beliefs.
Exactly, yeah. And these relationships can be really sneaky because they prevent us from going after our goals.
We're too busy trying to please them or get their approval.
Right. And those people might not even have our best interests at heart.
So it's not just about avoiding toxic people, but also about surrounding ourselves with people who actually support us.
Yes. People who believe in you and your potential.
I like that.
Now, here's another one that might surprise you. Not taking care of our physical health.
Oh, really? I never thought of that as self-sabotage.
But it can be a sneaky way we sabotage ourselves. Think about it. Neglecting healthy habits can be a way of punishing ourselves,
Oh.
or a way to cope with stress, or even a way to avoid dealing with emotional issues.
It's like we're running away from ourselves.
In a way, yeah, we deplete our energy and it impacts everything.
So taking care of ourselves physically, it's not just about looking good.
It's about so much more than that.
It's about respecting ourselves.
And supporting our mental and emotional well-being.
Yeah, like we're showing ourselves that we're worth taking care of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, now here's another one that I think a lot of people can relate to. Busyness. Always being busy.
But isn't that just part of life? I mean, everyone's busy these days.
It can be, but sometimes it's more than that. Wiest says that sometimes it's a way of avoiding deeper emotional needs.
So we're using busyness as a distraction.
It's like we're running on a hamster wheel.
Going nowhere.
We're in motion, but we're not actually moving forward.
Interesting. So what are we running from?
From the discomfort of stillness
Of just being with ourselves.
and from facing those big questions about our purpose and direction
It's easier to just stay busy.
than to actually face those things.
Wow, I'm starting to see how all these behaviors are connected. This fear of discomfort, this fear of facing the truth about ourselves.
Exactly. And that leads us to a really important question. How do we actually identify those subconscious commitments that are driving our behavior?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Well, Weiss suggests this exercise where you actually write down a list of your self-sabotaging behaviors,
Okay.
and then you try to figure out the subconscious messages behind them.
Like we're playing detective with our own minds. Okay, so for example, let's say I procrastinate on big projects at work.
Okay.
What kind of subconscious message could be behind that?
Well, it could be a fear of success.
Oh.
Maybe you don't believe you can handle the responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
or the recognition that comes with finishing those projects.
Okay.
Or maybe it's a fear of judgment. You're afraid of putting your work out there and being criticized.
So by figuring out the behavior and then asking why, we can start to understand those deeper beliefs.
Yes, those beliefs that are driving our actions.
That's fascinating.
It's about bringing those subconscious beliefs to the surface so you can challenge them,
Yeah.
create new, healthier patterns.
I like that. Okay, so let's say we've identified those subconscious commitments. How do we actually start to release those old patterns? They feel so ingrained sometimes.
That's where this idea of releasing the past comes in, which is a big theme in Wiest's book.
Okay.
She says that letting go of past hurt is crucial for overcoming self-sabotage.
But how do we actually do that? Everyone always says just let go, but it's so much easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely. Wiest agrees. She says that forcing yourself to just let go can actually backfire.
Really?
Yeah, true release comes from building a new, fulfilling life.
A life that we love.
Exactly. A life that makes the past fade away.
So it's not about erasing the past, but about creating a new story for ourselves.
Yes, a story that is more empowering and fulfilling.
I like that.
Now, she also suggests some techniques
Oh.
for releasing the past.
Mm.
One is this inner child visualization,
Okay.
where you imagine offering your younger self guidance and reassurance.
Oh, wow.
You acknowledge their pain, you offer compassion, And you essentially rewrite the narrative of those past experiences.
That's powerful. So we're not trying to erase the past, but we're reframing it
Yeah,
and making it part of a new, more empowered story.
exactly. And that leads us to the next stage, building a new future.
Okay.
It's about shifting our focus from what was to what could be.
This is where things start to feel more hopeful. Like we've identified the mountain, we understand why we're stuck at the bottom, and now we're ready to start climbing.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful tools for this stage is visualizing your highest potential future self.
Ooh, okay. Tell me more about this highest potential future self.
It's about imagining the best version of you, the person you want to become.
Okay.
And by creating this clear mental picture, you gain clarity and direction.
So it's not just daydreaming.
No, it's about getting specific
Mm,
about who you want to be or
mm.
what kind of life you want to create.
I like that.
Now, Wiest actually suggests a visualization exercise
Oh,
where you imagine meeting this future self and getting guidance from them
so we're tapping into the wisdom of our future
to
selves.
see how they got there.
That's so cool.
It's about recognizing that the potential for growth
Mm.
is already inside of you.
It's just waiting to be unlocked.
Exactly.
This is so inspiring. It's like we have this inner compass, this future self who can guide us.
And that brings us to a crucial element of this journey, developing emotional intelligence.
Okay, let's talk about that. We mentioned it before, but I want to go deeper. What exactly is emotional intelligence? And why is it so important for overcoming self-sabotage?
Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and respond to your emotions in a healthy way.
Mm.
It's about recognizing that your feelings aren't always facts
Oh,
and learning
gotcha.
to separate your actions from those temporary feelings
So we're becoming the master of our emotions.
instead of being ruled by them.
Yeah, we can't always control what we feel, but we can control how we react to those feelings.
Exactly. And Wiest actually talks about the difference between suppressing emotions and controlling them,
Okay, so suppressing is like pushing them down,
pretending they don't exist.
but controlling them is more about acknowledging them and understanding where they're coming from
Yes, and then choosing how to respond.
in a way that aligns with our values and goals.
Exactly. And mindfulness practices like meditation can be really helpful for this.
Okay.
They help us become observers of our thoughts and feelings.
Without being overwhelmed by them.
Yes, it's like creating space
Between us and our emotions.
so we can respond with clarity and intention.
This is where we start to see that shift. From self-sabotage to self-mastery.
Recognizing our role in our own pattern.
And empowering ourselves to make different choices.
Absolutely. And speaking of self-mastery, one of the key elements Wiest explores is this concept of principles.
Okay. What does she mean by principles, and how do they relate to self-mastery?
Well, principles are these fundamental truths that guide our actions and choices.
Like our North Star.
Exactly. They keep us on track even when things get tough.
So it's about having this set of values or beliefs that we can rely on when we're making decisions.
Exactly. Wiest contrasts the short-term gratification of inspiration with the long-form benefits of adhering to principles.
So principles are about the long game.
Yeah, she even compares principles to natural laws, like gravity.
Wow.
So just as gravity governs the physical world,
Principles govern our inner world.
they provide this framework for making choices.
Choices that align with our values and aspirations.
You got it. And by grounding ourselves in these principles,
Yeah.
we create a life that is not only fulfilling but sustainable,
We can weather the storms and achieve our goals.
with integrity and purpose.
I love that. So what kind of principles are we talking about here?
Well, Wiest just outlines specific principles for different areas of life:
Mm-hmm.
finances, relationships, health.
Okay, let's start with finances.
One of the key financial principles she talks about is living beneath your means.
Spending less than you earn.
Exactly. And prioritizing saving for the future.
That's a classic principle. But it's so easy to get caught up in consumerism.
It is, but this principle isn't just about being frugal. It's about creating financial stability and freedom.
So we're not constantly stressed about money.
Exactly.
And we can make choices that align with our values.
Now, in terms of relationships,
Mm-hmm.
Wiest talks about the importance of not relying on others for our sense of self-worth.
That's huge. So many of us look for validation from external sources.
Our partners, our friends, even social media,
Like we're giving our power away.
letting other people dictate our happiness.
So the principle here is about cultivating self-love
Yes, recognizing our own value,
and loving ourselves unconditionally.
regardless of what anyone else thinks or does.
And when we have that solid foundation of self-love, our relationships become healthier.
Exactly.
We're not trying to fill a void.
We're coming from a place of wholeness.
Okay, so we've covered finances and relationships. What about principles for health and well-being?
Well, Wiest emphasizes the principle of listening to your body
Tuning in to our own needs
and creating sustainable habit.
that support our physical, mental, and emotional well-being.
Exactly.
So it's about moving beyond those quick fixes
And fad diets.
and developing a deeper understanding of health,
Recognizing that health is a journey.
not a destination.
Exactly.
This is all starting to come together. We're creating a life that aligns with our values, our goals, and our true selves.
And principles are the compass that guides us.
It's about moving beyond inspiration and into a more sustainable way of being.
Yeah.
And you mentioned emotional intelligence earlier. I'd love to explore that a little bit more. How do we actually cultivate emotional intelligence and break free from those reactive patterns? Okay, so we're back, and we've been talking about all different ways we self-sabotage and all the reasons why we do it. And I'm thinking about the emotional side of this whole journey. It can't be easy to just flip a switch and suddenly stop self-sabotaging.
You're so right about that. It's not like we can just decide to change and then poof, everything's different. Wiest talks about the emotional landscape of this whole process. It's like we're on this climb and the terrain isn't always easy.
Yeah, there are going to be bumps along the way.
Definitely. There are emotional valleys and unexpected storms.
So what kind of emotional weather should we be prepared for on this climb?
Well, one common thing people experience is resistance.
Yeah.
That feeling of being stuck.
Oh, I know resistance. It's like every time I try to step outside my comfort zone, this invisible force field pops up and pushes me back.
That's a great way to describe it. And Wiest warns against just trying to power through it.
Why is that? I always thought willpower was important for making changes.
It is, but think of it this way. You're trying to open a door that's jammed shut.
Okay.
If you just keep pushing harder without figuring out what's blocking it, you're probably going to break something.
Right.
Resistance is similar
So we need to figure out what's causing that jam.
before we can actually move forward.
So what do we do instead of just pushing harder?
Wiest suggests reconnecting with your why.
Your purpose for making the change in the first place.
Exactly. It's like remembering why you started climbing that mountain.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, another emotion that often comes up is anger.
Anger. I wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah, it might seem counterintuitive, but Wiest sees anger as potentially helpful.
How so?
Well, anger often shows up when our boundaries have been crossed.
Or when we've been ignoring our own needs.
Exactly. So it's like a signal that something needs to change.
A wake-up call.
Exactly. She says we should listen to that anger and try to understand what it's telling us,
Instead of just trying to suppress it.
right? It can be fuel for setting healthier boundaries.
And going after what we want.
Now, of course, there's also sadness.
Yeah. Sadness is a tough one.
It can be really heavy. But Wiest emphasizes allowing ourselves to grieve
To actually feel the sadness.
and move through it at our own pace.
So we're not rushing the process.
Exactly. Sadness is not a weakness,
It's a sign that we're human.
that we have a heart and that we care.
Okay, so we've got resistance, anger, and sadness. What other emotions might we experience on this journey?
Well, guilt can be a big one,
That feeling of not being good enough?
or like we did something wrong.
Oh yeah, guilt can keep us stuck in the past.
Replaying those moments we feel bad about,
Wiest says that guilt often comes from this belief that we're flawed.
or that we should have known better.
So we need to challenge those beliefs.
Recognize that everyone makes mistakes,
We're not perfect.
and those mistakes don't define us.
Okay, so it's about self-compassion.
And forgiveness.
Recognizing that we did the best we could at the time. Another emotion that can be really tough is embarrassment.
Yeah, that feeling of being exposed or judged,
It can make us afraid to take risks.
or be ourselves.
Wiest says that we need to challenge those fears of judgment.
And remember that our worthiness doesn't come from other people.
It comes from within.
Exactly. It's about owning our choices and letting go of that need to please everyone.
True belonging comes from accepting ourselves.
Imperfections and all.
That's a good one.
Now, there's also resentment.
Oh, that's a tough one. It's like holding on to anger and bitterness.
Yeah, that feeling of being wronged.
Wiest says it often comes from unmet expectations.
This belief that someone should have acted differently.
Or that we deserve something better.
Exactly.
It's hard, but we have to remember that we can't control other people.
We can only control ourselves.
Our own reactions.
And forgiveness is really important here.
Not for the other person.
But for ourselves.
To let go of that burden.
And then there's regret.
That feeling that we should have done things differently.
Like we missed the opportunity.
Yeah, regret can be so painful.
But we says we can use regret as a guide,
Okay.
a compass pointing us toward what we really want,
So we can use those lessons from the past.
to make different choices in the present.
And then, of course, there's fear,
Fear can hold us back in so many ways.
especially when it's chronic.
It keeps it playing small, avoiding anything that feels risky,
Wiest says that chronic fear often comes from a belief that we're not safe.
or that we can't handle challenges,
So we need to challenge those beliefs.
and remind ourselves that we're stronger than we think.
And that we have the resources to face difficult situations.
It's about choosing courage over comfort.
Facing our fears head on.
Exactly. And through all of these emotional ups and downs, it's important to remember that overcoming self-sabotage isn't about becoming emotionless.
It's not about shutting down our feelings.
Exactly. It's about learning to work with them,
To understand them.
to become the master of our emotional world.
Rather than being controlled by our emotions.
That's a great way to put it. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. This journey is not a straight line.
There will be bumps in the road.
There will be ups and downs.
Twists and turns.
It's not about being perfect
It's about embracing the messiness of being human.
and having the courage to keep showing up,
To keep learning.
keep growing.
And never give up on ourselves.
And remember, you're not alone on this journey.
There are so many others climbing their own mountains.
Let's support each other
Celebrate each other's wins.
and offer help when it's needed.
Because together, we can move mountains.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope this exploration of the mountain as you has inspired you to embrace your own climb and reach for those peaks you've been dreaming of.
Keep exploring
Keep growing.
and keep shining your light.